The initial research was reading these documents that the CIA had published. You still can read them on the CIA's website. But I honestly had no idea that Dr. Zhivago had been used as a weapon. I was somewhat familiar with the CIA's soft propaganda campaigns, especially in the 50s and 60s. I knew how the CIA had used art and music and other cultural events as a kind of long game to switch Soviet minds to a more democratic way of thinking, and vice versa. The Soviets did the same thing. But I didn't know about the books program per se. And these CIA documents really outlined not just Dr. Zhivago, but Animal Farm and other books that had been banned within the Soviet Union. And that's what basically made them a weapon, is that they were being banned from the citizens where it was written, not Animal Farm, but Dr. Zhivago. And thus the CIA knew they had something to work with. They knew that Soviet citizens would want to read this banned book and question why it was banned. So really delving deep into the CIA's history, reaching out to anyone I knew that had been in the agency prior, based on my political experience, and just going down this almost rabbit hole, first at the CIA. I remember reading these reports and memos, which led me down to the rabbit hole that basically forms the characters of my book, because I was reading it and there's all these redactions, big white spaces, crossed out lines. And I thought, the people that know what these redactions are would be the people who type these memos and reports. And this is just some random thought that popped in my head. And so I started researching the early typing pools and secretarial work at the CIA. And that led me to learn more about the women and women's roles in the early days of the CIA. And my first character is actually a group of characters called the typists that form almost like a Greek chorus in my novel. And they're narrating what their lives are like and also what this book's program is about. For me, it was the group that came first, the Greek chorus, the voice of the we. I had actually never really written in the voice of the we, the first person plural. And it was really the first line of the novel, which is still in there, just came to me while I was doing this research, and I had emailed it to myself in the middle of the night and just thought, this will be fun to try to do. This is almost like just a pure experiment, like not thinking this is how the whole novel is going to go, just seeing, could I tell this story through this voice that really just came to me. I will say that doesn't happen a lot. It didn't happen for any of my other characters. But the voice of the type is like just sprung into my head, almost fully formed. And so the thing about them is I started doing all the research about these women in the CIA who had been a part of World War II, spying, leading missions alongside men like Allen Dulles and people who founded the early CIA. But when they left the war, instead of being up there with Dulles, next to his office, they were pretty much put in roles behind the desk as secretaries or in personnel, human resources, or the typing pool. So I started researching about them, started researching about this books program, and it all just started coming together where I was writing from this voice that I was asked, really having fun with, thinking of how it'd be to be this kind of almost spy on the spies. They're kind of these invisible women. They're not taken very seriously. People forget they're even in the room, but they're learning so much information about these real spies in the CIA. So I thought that was fun. And it did lead me to quickly realize where I was limited in that point of view, at least for me, for the novel I wanted to tell. So some novels like The Virgin Suicides by Jeff Eugenides, all in first person we, one of the most beautiful books. And he could pull it off. It was the whole way through. But for me, I needed to show, I wanted to break out of the typing pool and have these characters have their own lives. So that's where my characters of Sally and Irina came from, which formed two other major voices of the novel. So it was more like the group, and then I saw the people as individuals. It kind of came that way. I just started thinking, like, I really want to get more into character development. I really want to follow someone who's going to leave, the typing desk and go into the field. Oh, I'm sorry, my dog is barking. Okay. Anyway, I'll restate it. It's just, I was really wanting to follow them. I wanted to follow them as the book made its way around the world. And so Irina came to me first as one of these members of the typing pool who's, just going in for a job, but she's, she's from the Soviet Union, and the CIA sees something special about her. And they kind of pull her out and teach her to be one of these people that's a messenger. She's this invisible messenger who can, slide a package to another man on the bus without anyone noticing. And I wasn't thinking that Sally and Irina's lives would be tied up together. I was just really purely exploring what it'd be like to be that woman, kind of coming of age in this situation. And Sally came to me, I don't even know exactly how she came to me, other than I think she was someone I really felt excited to write about. She's more of this glamorous person who had been in World War II, used as what, you would call a honey trap, this beautiful, seductive woman who could pry secrets out of powerful men. And after the war was over, she kind of was floating around adrift before she's pulled back into the CIA to basically train Irina and also find out information. And when I was writing this, I was never wanting to write this good guy, bad guy story of the US versus the Soviet Union. I think that's pretty boring, because I also think, what the United States was doing at the time was incredibly hypocritical of thinking they are actually the land of the free, when so many things were going on where we certainly weren't the land of the free. And one of those things was the Lavender Scare, which I started researching about during the same time, which is when the United States government was throwing anyone they suspected of being gay or lesbian out of the government, publishing their names in the newspaper, basically destroying lives, leading people to commit suicide. And it just went on the tails of the Red Scare. And I wanted to know what it would be like to be one of those people. And that was how Irina and Sally's relationship kind of developed in my mind, and kind of a counter to the Eastern love story that I also explore. The book takes place in two parts. It takes place in the West and it takes place in the East. And in the West, we're mostly Washington, D.C., but we also go to London at one point. And I was really just following where the book went. So the book started off as being written in the Soviet Union by Boris Pasternak. It was banned there. And then word spreads in the West that this book is banned. They want to get it out, and then they want to smuggle it back in. And so I'm following the steps of the CIA's real mission that was detailed in these memos and reports about it. And that was like kind of my loose outline. And other than that, I really started focusing on women. And when I started focusing on women, I knew that I needed to have that counter in the Eastern section, which is how I started writing about Olga Ivanskaya, who is Boris Pasternak's real life mistress and muse for the character of Lara. Of course, I was interested in her, she being the person who I was, inspired my namesake. And maybe I'm just naturally drawn to the women in the story, or the women behind the men, because I had this typist on this one side, and then I was looking at Olga's life. And to me, she was an inspiration for Dr. Zhivago. And she also suffered greatly because of her relationship with Boris Pasternak. I won't give away too many things about what the book explores, but she had to go to the Gulag not once, but twice, due to her association with Pasternak and due to her wanting to protect the book. And she played such a pivotal role in his life and in the life of this book that I knew she had to be the anchor on the East. And the first thing I had to do is actually go to Russia. And I was in grad school, and we saved up a lot of money to go there because I had never stepped foot in that part of the world. And I had been reading all this research, everything I could find about Olga, everything I could find about Boris, just Soviet literature in general. And we finally got to go there and see, Moscow and Peredelkino, which is the little writers' colony where Boris Pasternak lived in his later life. And seeing that area and just visualizing what it would have been like to have been Olga or Boris and walk these streets themselves was so pivotal in my research experience that for me, I have to have that feeling of what a place feels like to be able to truly write about it. And the West, I lived in DC for 10 years at that, before that point. So I knew what DC felt like in the heat of the summer, what DC felt like in, when the cherry blossoms are out, and what it's like to commute wearing a suit to work. So I could feel that. I could feel the map of DC, but I needed to feel the same thing in Russia. So that was the first research trip I went on during the draft 1 of the novel. But I would later go back to Washington, D.C., because I had been living in Texas at the time. I'd go to London, I'd go to Paris, and all of these places resulted in changes and inspiration for the novel. Knopf sent me, and also with the Reese Witherspoon symbol on it. And I remember it still just feel like this is my book. This is like a part of me. It's about to go out in the world. So it's a wonderful feeling, but it's slightly terrifying. Like, this is real. Here you go. It's for you to judge. But it was such an incredible moment. And I remember before the books were printed, I went to different things like Book Expo and seeing like a poster of it on the wall, or just different like events that were leading up to the publication, and just feeling like, is this even happening to me? And I think that, one of the most surreal experiences, I think, was, and it's actually happened throughout the years, I was in a hospital. My son we had thought he broke something. He didn't. We were waiting for an x-ray, and it was like really dreary place filled with people. And I see someone reading my book, like right across from me. And I'm just like, do I say, my husband, of course, says something, but I'm just like, this is surreal. Like, when people contact me, it still feels like I can't even imagine the breadth of it, I guess. So like, when seeing a stranger read it just seems crazy to me. Like, how'd you get that? And it's like, well, it's in bookstores, like people are going to read it. So, but one of the best memories I'll say is when I was doing an event in Pasadena on my book tour. And I get contacted just through my website from a woman who said, I want to take you out for drinks after your event. I would love to. I was in the 1960 CIA typing pool. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is tough information to find out. And this woman, and at first I was like, oh no, she's going to tell me I got it all wrong. It was, wrong information of what it was like to actually have lived it. And she told me that I saved her from writing her memoir because it was so spot on. And I went out to dinner with this woman, or for drinks with this woman in her 80s, and we were just drinking, and she was telling me about her incredible life that should be its own novel. And I just was sitting back thinking, like, this is absolutely wonderful and one of the best memories I have. So that was pretty cool. I'm not going to say the working title, but I'm working on a book. So actually now I live in New England. I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is on the border of Maine. And I've been inspired by the history of the area, is particularly interested in the Salem witch trial, but something very specific about it. I'm not interested in writing, about the trials themselves. I'm not, Arthur Miller. I am interested in, there was almost 150 women and men who were also arrested and imprisoned and then let go after the trials ended to go back to their villages where they might be living with the man who accused them, or their mother accused them, or their neighbor accused them. I'm interested in how these regular people got caught up in such a spectacle, and what their lives were like after the fact, and how they go on to live their lives. And of course, like anything else, that's the idea, but then it turns into so much more about friendship and motherhood and being a woman. But it leads up until in 1711, where these people were given reparations in this country. They were given reparations for what happened to them and their family members, and then were giving reparations by the government. So I'm fascinated with kind of redemption stories and what it means to kind of have your name cleared, like having your name permanently marked as something you never did, and then possibly having it cleared or not, and what that means to a person. So yeah, that was something I'm fascinated about. I went to an exhibit. There was this, it was called the Reckoning exhibit at the Peabody Museum in Salem, which is now on tour throughout the country. But they had all of these letters that people had written after the trials asking for 60 pounds because, my wife we had to pay for the handcuffs, we had to pay for her food, we had to pay for her blanket in jail and actually bail her out, even though she didn't do anything. And 60 pounds is what I want. And these letters asking for money were so strange to me. I never heard of it before. There's very little at all written about, these reparations, and just that like one inkling of something sent me down a rabbit hole of a million different paths. And that's what I'm working on now. Yeah, hopefully done soon.